The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
There we go. How about turning on the microphone? We're off to a flying start, aren't we here? Where do we start? A lot of complaining about the college football. We'll get to that. I don't even know if it's complaining anymore about the Commanders. It's such a hopeless situation. What good does it do to complain? It's all about next year and the years beyond that. Problem is, and I've been saying this for over a week now, when your season dies on Thanksgiving and you have to drag this carcass around for this amount of time with a 17-game schedule, it really gets miserable. And we got 5 more Mondays until, presumably, Ron Rivera is out. We got a bye week coming up. Then they play at Los Angeles against the Rams, December 17th. Rams yesterday rolled it up on Cleveland, which has a great defense, so God knows what they're going to do with this one. Then San Francisco comes here. Did you see what San Francisco did yesterday to Philadelphia? 42-14. The 49ers scored 42 on the Eagles. Now, the Commanders did score on Philadelphia. I'll grant you that. But with the state of this defense right now and San Francisco kicking it into high gear, and they may be in a position to get closer to locking up home field for the playoffs and have that first round bye in the NFC. Right now, they're a game behind the Eagles, but they have the tiebreaker since they beat them yesterday, so they could be coming here with a lot to play for. And Kyle Shanahan, although he doesn't have Dan Snyder anymore to kick around, he likes to kick around this team as he's come here in the past and done that. And then finally the Cowboys. Oh yeah, we got the Jets game in between on Christmas Eve, and maybe they're in a bigger mess than this team is. But talk about a game, especially if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play, that nobody is going to care about. That's the Christmas Eve game. But anyway, that's where we are with them. The whining is coming from the college football people, and I'm a little conflicted on this. I certainly can see it from Florida State's point of view, but having watched what Georgia did last year to TCU, I don't want to see that again. I don't want to see Florida State with a backup quarterback lose by 40 to Alabama. I don't want to see it. Or Michigan. I guess they'd play Michigan in the first round if they made it as the 4 seed. But, I mean, come on. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see that. And I understand. They did everything that they were supposed to do during the season. They won every single game. They will be remembered forever as the team that got cheated out of being in the playoff. I think they can hang their hat on that, and there will be documentaries done in the years to come, and players who go on the banquet circuit to talk about all the disrespect that they got from the committee and yada, yada, yada. But, we want to be entertained. We want close games. And as Kirk Herbstreit mentioned last week, the average margin of victory in the playoffs since it started is 19 points. That's a blowout. Nobody wants to see blowouts. You want to see good, compelling, close games. And these, I think, will give us that. I think you could even make the case that Texas should have been in and Georgia should have been there. Don't you believe that Georgia is one of the 3 best teams in the country, certainly one of the 4 best teams, and they didn't get in. And they were 2-time defending national champions and played a great game against Alabama. They just lost. So, we'll get to that, and I thought there was a really good breakdown on ESPN yesterday. Joey Galloway laying this out as to why they had to go in this direction and why Florida State got left out. But let's move on to the Commanders. I was there yesterday. I don't go to many games, and I did go yesterday because of it was a charity situation where somebody had won a raffle where they could go to a game with me. That was, I guess, very exciting for them. The game was not exciting, but they got to go, and that was nice. And I got to meet a couple of really nice guys, Mark and Ari, and thank you for participating in the charity. It's called Macomb. It's a series of group homes for people with various disabilities, including my brother, who is autistic, And so I was very happy that they were there to spend the afternoon with me, and in my misery of watching the team that I've rooted for since 1966 look absolutely terrible. And I find that I get more out of watching the games on television because you get the various replay angles and the commentary on TV and what the sideline reporters are saying. And Clarissa Thompson doesn't do it anymore, so she doesn't make it up. I assume it's true. All that stuff I get on my nice warm recliner in front of my 65-inch HD TV. I mean, that's a great pleasure for me. Schlepping out to the stadium and sitting around mostly Dolphin fans, you had to be. I tweeted out a picture of this yesterday at Andy Poland 1 if you want to check it. As I looked at the stands on the other side, it was mostly Aqua. I would say of the sellout crowd, and what do they have there now, 65,000 capacity, something like that. I would say if it was capacity, that at least 30,000, maybe even 40,000 of the fans were Dolphin fans there. It kind of looked like that, and it sounded like that, when Tyreek Hill was taking them to school. And what you get when you're at the game, where you see the whole field, the sense of just how ridiculously bad this pass defense is, that when you look at two great receivers, certainly Tyreek Hill is among the best, and I think Jalen Waddle is an outstanding number two. Waddle had a wide-open pass that he dropped in the middle of the field, and Hill had two in great. Well, one of them was a great catch. The other one, I could have caught it. He was so wide open. And when you see them lining up in man coverage with a rookie Quan Martin on Tyreek Hill, you go, oh, Gevalt. I know what's going to happen next. And sure enough, 78-yard touchdown pass. And when you can see the whole field and you can just see how inept they are in pass coverage, well, it's no wonder that they've given up 90 points over the last two games, 121 over the last three. Sure, they've been helped by Sam Howell throwing a pick six in each of those three games, and if he throws one more, he's going to tie the all-time record set by Matt Schaub, 4 straight games with a pick six, but at least that'll have to wait until at least they play at Los Angeles on the 17th. And when you watch that and you have a full picture of it, you understand just how bad it is. And I just had to laugh listening to sports talk all week where a lot of the narrative was, well, if the defense looks really good against the high-powered Dolphins, we're going to be really upset that Jack Del Rio wasn't fired earlier in the season, that they waited until after Thanksgiving to get rid of him. He wasn't the problem. He's not the problem. And maybe it's even worse with Ron Rivera calling the signals. They're inept. They're inept in the pass defense category. And you could say, well, they got rid of 2 top pass rushers in Young and Sweat. Yeah, okay, they did. But it's more than that. It's and you'll hear a little bit later on from Hill, who says, we looked at the coverage and it was kind of like, he and Tua winked at each other. And the audible was called, and he was wide open for a 78-yard touchdown pass. Let's get to some of the locker room stuff. This is Ron Rivera, and the question of, and I don't think it's all this, because I think that it's also scheme, but the question of the roster building that he's been crowing about for 4 years. He had control of that coach-centric operation, and now as he comes to the end of his run, his 4-year run as coach of the team, what about that vaunted talent level?
At the beginning of the season, there was a thought that from a talent standpoint, there had been some improvements, whether through the draft or free agency. And I wonder what you think about that now. Do you think that they're still there, or is there more work to be done than maybe we all thought?
I think there's a little bit of work left to be done, but I do think we have some talent in some spots. I think some guys are most certainly gifted enough to help us win football games. And I think there's opportunities, but we've missed those opportunities. We didn't make plays when we had opportunities to. And there were some, that were pretty good examples today of just missed opportunities. You can't do that. You just can't do that in this league, especially against really good teams. You've got to be able to handle those situations, circumstances, and when it does come to you, you got to make sure you make those plays when they're around to be made. And then again, from the coaching aspect, we just got to make sure we're putting them in the best position to have success.
And we know that Dallas and Miami are good teams, but are you surprised at how big the gap seems to be these last 2 weeks?
I'm disappointed that it looks that way. I really am.
Disappointed because it's on you. You had the final say on the talent, and this is the talent level of the team. Now, I don't think it's all talent. I think Rivera is right about how the players have to be in the right positions. That's coaching, and play better and perform better. And just this note with what San Francisco did yesterday in Philadelphia, winning 42-14. It was a year ago today, only a year ago, that Brock Purdy replaced an injured Jimmy Garoppolo in the first quarter against Miami. His passer rating, according to what Peter King has today, his passer rating in 21 games, including playoffs, since that day, 114.1, the best in football. Mr. Irrelevant, last pick of the draft, passer rating in 21 games, including playoffs, including the NFC Championship game against Philadelphia, where literally he could not throw. He could not throw a football at all. His passer rating is the best in football at 114.1. So some of it is how they're coached. I would wonder about Brock Purdy if he were taken by Washington and put in with this group of players, how good he would look. I don't think the results would be all that different from Sam Howell. Might be a little better, but it's a poorly constructed roster, and it's a poor job by someone who I don't blame him for taking the job that he did, and I don't even blame Dan Snyder based on where he was at the time for hiring Ron Rivera. I mean, he needed somebody to just, handle the mess, and he did. He did a good job of deflecting all the mishigas that was going on with Snyder behind the scenes, but the reality is, at the end of 4 years, this team is nowhere near being any good. And Josh Harris saying at a I think it was a Sports Business Daily conference this past week that they have to have patience. Yeah, buckle up. It's going to be a while on this. This is an interesting thing from Rivera because everything he's been saying in the last month and a half has been based on the quarterback, the growth of the quarterback, the growth of Sam Howell, the growth of the roster. Anybody see any growth yesterday in the ugly loss against Miami?
You've talked a lot about growth with this team the last several weeks. Is it hard to say that after a game like today?
It is, John. To be frank about it, yes. When you spot 21 points to a very good football team, you're gonna struggle to win a game, and you can't do the things that we did and expect to win.
Yeah. So there was no growth yesterday, and I like this from Antonio Gibson. It sounds like he's tired of hearing this stuff about growth. He's been listening to the coach, I guess, preach to the players about growth. And he's looking at what happened yesterday against Miami, the 45-15 debacle, and saying, that's it. We're not going to talk about growth anymore.
There's been this steady message of growth and development. Does that feel like it's happening, or does it just start to sound like words?
To me, honestly, I'll say it sounds like words now. We're not going to keep saying that back end of the season. It's too late for growth right now, I feel like. But like I said, we can finish off the season strong and, head into, next year with growth, but it's too late for that right now.
Too late for growth. Like, save it, Ron, okay? We just can't talk about that anymore. Nobody's seeing growth when you've given up 90 points in the last 2 weeks, okay, to good teams. You also gave up, 39 to a mediocre Seattle team, right? So 121 points given up in 3 weeks. It's not good. Not good at all. And Jonathan Allen, who's been here the longest and is a leader, plays hard, suits up every week. He's expressed big frustration during the season, unleashed an F-bomb-filled tirade after they lost to the Giants. He's had it. I mean, this to me sounds like a guy who needs a change of scenery. He may come back next year. I don't think they're going to be able to trade him because of his contract, and he's now been around the league for a while, and he came into the league with questions because he had shoulder surgeries at Alabama. He's been a stand-up guy, and he's been a cornerstone player on this team, but he's realizing he's got no team. He's got no team here. This is Jonathan Allen after yesterday.
What needs to change to get this thing back going the right way?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
What happened today?
It's not a very good defense. Can't stop the run, can't stop the pass.
How does that get fixed?
That's a great question.
Say to the guys as they go in the bye week.
What are you playing for? You're playing for your pride? It's up to every guy. I know what I'm playing for, and that's all I'm going to do, continue to do.
Does the message of growth and development, does that kind of get old after a while when there aren't wins to go with it?
again, I've been here for 7 years. There's only so much growth and development you can go through before you start demanding performance. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. Can't stop the run, can't stop the pass. And by the way, did you hear the whoop, whoop in the back? You know what that is? It was a fire alarm that was going off. In fact, everybody had to evacuate the locker room briefly while they found out it was a false alarm. So remember the last game, the last home game before they went to Dallas, there was no water because, there's no hot water, so they couldn't take any showers because they would have had to shut down the water main. I mean, we still have Dan Snyder to blame for this. This is like, when you step in dog dew and you're walking around and your shoe stinks, but you can't just scrape it off in the office or put it in the trash can because it's going to smell for everybody else. So you just got to kind of find your way outside and scrape it on the curb. That's what's left here. That's they're walking around with the stench of Snyder still on them. And I'll tell you this, I was out there yesterday and the video boards look really good. They spent $40 million. They're going to have to spend probably more than that just to keep this thing up and running for another 5-6 years until they get a new stadium built. But it's a mess that's been left behind, and Ron Rivera is part of the final stages of it. Hopefully next year they will get it right. And by the way, anybody who wants Bill Belichick, you can have them. They're even worse right now. They lost 6-0 yesterday. 6-0. They're terrible. And so there's going to be a new regime here next year. And I'll get to what Barry Svrluga said about that coming up. He's got a column today where he's looking at the future, and the future isn't filled with 60-plus men. It's filled with men in their 30s and their 40s who could take this team into the next stage and hopefully bring them back to where they used to be many years ago, in some cases before some of these guys were born. If you look at some of the ages of these coaches, they were mere babies when we had good times here in Washington with the football team. We'll get to that, plus some of the kvetching that continues after the college football playoff was announced yesterday. A lot of unhappy Florida State people, a lot of unhappy Georgia people, and I thought Joey Galloway did a good job of kind of putting it out there like this is why it is. It is what it is because of this, and we'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
All right, I got Tony coming up on a Monday. Also in the next hour, Ed Cooley, the coach at Georgetown, had a crushing loss on Saturday night, but it's the way that he handled that which I think is worth noting, and we'll get to that and a whole lot more. Of course, a lot more on the college football kvetching about how the playoff is set up and how FSU isn't going to be in there and how Georgia's not going to be in there, and it all gets straightened out next year when they go to 12 teams, but the airing of the grievances continues, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The only upside of yesterday's 45-15 loss for the Commanders to the Dolphins is we got a peek at what hopefully the future looks like. And the future yesterday was wearing aqua. Not the players, the coach, Mike McDaniel, who was among many who were here under Mike Shanahan. I mean, it's amazing that you look across the league and you see the names of the coaches. They are all off the Shanahan tree, including, of course, his son Kyle, who will be here in a couple of weeks when the Commanders face the 49ers, more than a couple of weeks, but December 31st, when the 49ers come back here to probably dance on that turf as the Dolphins did yesterday. But the coach of the Dolphins is Mike McDaniel. He is 40 years old. He was on the staff of Mike Shanahan. And Ron Rivera is 61 years old. Look, I'm older than Ron. I mean, I'm not gonna say that he's incompetent and he's senile, teetering, whatever. No, but the game is passing him by, as we're seeing now with Bill Belichick, who's in his 70s. Not for everybody. Pete Carroll's still got a good team. They may be in the playoffs with Seattle, and Andy Reid has had Super Bowl teams in Kansas City, and Andy Reid may still be the best coach in the NFL. But as Barry Svrluga writes in his column today, he says, go down the list of coaches in this league who will be doing this 5-10 years from now, who will be thinking and rethinking about ways to do their jobs, and would have to include Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia, Sean McVay with the Rams, presumably, unless he bolts for TV, maybe Matt LaFleur in Green Bay and Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, and McDaniel. They all came up on the offensive side of the ball, and their ages, 43, 42, 37, 44, 38, and 40. And he does note that Houston's DeMeco Ryans is 39 years old, and he's doing a hell of a job this year with the Texans, but he's got C.J. Stroud, who looks to be the find of the draft and maybe one of those franchise quarterbacks of the future. So it's not necessarily all offensive guys. It's not necessarily all guys who are in their 30s and 40s, but realistically, if you look at the numbers, it's offense and age under 45 is what you're looking for. And I think what's going to happen here next year is that there will be a team president, a head of football operations, a general manager, and they will hire the coach. And they will hire one of these guys. A couple of suggestions from Zverluga as to who could be the coach here. Ben Johnson, 37-year-old offensive coordinator in Detroit, and Bobby Slowick, 36-year-old, who's in his first year as offensive coordinator in Houston. Again, you got quarterbacks there. Detroit's got a quarterback who's been to a Super Bowl with the Rams and has become a very, very good quarterback for the Lions. And then you have, of course, Schaub not Schaub. Boy, that's a Freudian slip. Schaub is the one that holds the record for 4 straight games of throwing a pick six. No, it's C.J. Stroud, who's looking really good in Houston. But I think that's what's going to happen here next year. I don't believe any of this Belichick talk. I don't want to believe any of the Belichick talk. They're going to do this the right way. And as Josh Harris said, you're going to have patience. It's going to take some time. They're not going to come at you next year and say, oh, get ready, buy your playoff tickets, get on board. No, they're not doing that. Now, the one thing they did yesterday, as my buddy Tom Lavero pointed out, kind of a Snyderish move, is that they announced a sellout crowd for the game against the Dolphins. Yeah, a sellout crowd wearing mostly aqua. Again, I tweeted out a picture of this yesterday, and Andy Pollin won. It's amazing how many people there were rooting for the Dolphins, and that's kind of a shameful thing when you sell out your stadium to the other team's fans. At some point, you'd like to see a stadium filled with burgundy and gold, but we're a ways away from that happening, and they're not going to turn anybody away who wants to buy a ticket. That's the way that works. All right, let's get to the college football yesterday. I think it stunned a lot of people that Florida State didn't get in because, and among those who was telling us all last week was Booger McFarland, made appearances with Tony on his show here and on PTI, and he said, hey, if Alabama beats Georgia, more than likely they're both out, because you're going to have to put in Florida State, an undefeated team. If Washington wins their bowl game or wins their championship, the Pac-12, you got to put them in, and of course you got to put in Michigan, undefeated, and then and maybe Texas, because you have to put Texas in over Alabama since they beat Alabama. Well, I don't think he considered for a moment that Florida State would be left out, but in fact they were. And their coach is Mike Norvell. They actually had a live shot on ESPN when this was announced, the teams, and you saw the devastation on their faces. This is something that became very popular with the college basketball tournament. Among the first, I think, was George Washington with Mike Jarvis, where they were often on the bubble, and they'd have a camera set up in Jarvis's house, and they'd show the disappointment when he didn't get in. That makes for good television. Made for good television yesterday, didn't make for good times for Florida State. And Norvell put out a statement later in the day. He said, I'm disgusted and infuriated with the committee's decision today to have what was earned on the field taken away because a small group of people decided they knew better than the results of the games. What is the point of playing games? What happened today goes against everything that is true and right in college football. And yes, if this were a true playoff, you'd have to put them in. They were one of the Power 5 conferences. They went undefeated. They won their league championship game. You'd have to put them in. But they're playing without their starting quarterback. Jordan Travis out for the year with a broken leg. They actually had to play a third-string quarterback to win the ACC championship game. And the eye test would tell you that they're not one of the 4 best teams right now without Jordan Travis, and that's what kept them out. Is that fair? No, it doesn't seem fair at all. But that's not what the College Football Playoffs Committee is tasked with doing. They're tasked with picking the 4 best teams. So Norvell is able to calm down a little bit. He's going to be able to play Georgia now in the Orange Bowl, which is, sets up as nicely as the Snub Bowl, the two teams that people maybe thought should have been in, Florida State and Georgia playing against each other. And after the statement came out, this was his verbal reaction to being left out.
I was just hurt for our players. I mean, to be honest with you, that was it was one of the tougher moments that I've had to experience, and just for all that they've done. You talk to a team about responding to adversity, getting up and going to give all that you can to be able to find a way to win a college football game. And like Coach Smart said, it is hard. I mean, it's hard to do. It's hard to especially when you face some of the adversities that we've had here this year, whether it's injury or just different things to overcome. But it's all part of it. And, as we tell our team all the time, your truest identity shows up in times of great adversity. And we faced it, and, they put it on display.
Yeah, and they did. Look, you can only win the games you play. And if Clemson was supposed to be Clemson this year and they would have beaten Clemson, well, it would look a lot better. But Clemson wasn't very good. They beat Florida. Florida wasn't very good this year. And, style points count. Yeah, you have to roll. Texas, I think, certainly helped themselves by blowing Oklahoma State off the field in the Big 12 championship on Saturday afternoon. I think that was helpful to them. And that's just the reality that they face this year. Wouldn't be next year. An undefeated team is not going to be left out of a 12-team field. But finally, in the last year of this 4-team playoff, what have they been doing? It's 10 years now. Finally, in the last year of it, they ran into something that they could have had in years past. And you got a lot of hurt feelings here with Florida State. Now, again, Booger McFarland was among the loudest on this, saying, forget it. If Alabama wins, then Florida State is certainly in, and Alabama and Georgia cancel each other out, and they're out of this. And you got to put Texas in because Texas beat Alabama. Well, Texas got in, I guess, because they beat Alabama, but Florida State is left out. And so as they had a roundtable yesterday to analyze this with Booger McFarland, with Reese Davis, the host, and with Joey Galloway, a former Ohio State star, actually played here briefly with the Redskins, and Kirk Herbstreit, who's the kind of the guru of college football, they looked at this, and it started with a loud complaining from Booger.
This is the same Alabama team who needed a prayer in Jordan Hare to beat an Auburn team that lost to New Mexico State. So that's really what has me bothered right now.
Reese, can you deliver the strength of record, strength of schedule thing? Because you're making it sound as if Alabama played nobody.
No, I'm not.
Go ahead.
Yes, you are, because they're in the top 5 in strength of schedule.
Yes.
Florida State's 55th. I totally get what you're saying. It's absolutely heartbreaking and devastating for them. The ACC has a winning record against the SEC this year, 6-4. 2 non-conference games for Florida State this year against the SEC, and they won both of them. I get it, but they're a different team, and this has been your point, Joey.
Yes, that has been my point. And so I feel awful for Florida State and Jordan Travis, because if he was still playing, this would be a different conversation. Everything you speak of was accomplished with Jordan Travis as their quarterback.
They won the last 2 games without him, though.
Yes, and that's when we saw this team with Tate Rodemaker
and
Brock Glenn.
Yes.
55 yards passing last night, it wasn't pretty. Here's the thing, Boog, and honestly, I hear everything you're saying. If our goal is to have the 4 best teams, there's nothing to do with what you deserve. There's nowhere in the bylaws that say you have to be undefeated. There's nowhere in the bylaws that say if you're in a Power 5 conference, you're the champion undefeated, you get in. I feel terrible, but when we look at this Florida State team and what they are today, what they were last night, what Alabama, who lost to Texas, who was the 3rd team in this thing, what they were then and what they are now, this Alabama team is different, and you know this. And this Florida State team is different, and you know this. They lost their quarterback. It's not a receiver. If Worthy doesn't play for Texas, they're still a really good football team. When you lose your quarterback, That is different than any other position in any other sport on earth. Your quarterback's the most important player.
You just got to win a different way.
Let's get Kirk in quickly. Kirk, when you've heard these discussions and these arguments, there's a lot on Florida State's side, from winning against the SEC to the ACC success against the SEC. Is this simply a case where, had Jordan Travis not been hurt, or, to be fair, let's say Tate Rodemaker had really put up some numbers offensively in the Florida game, so you had a little more data to support that Florida State would be competitive, that this would be a no-brainer decision and the Seminoles would be in. And this all centers around the established criteria by the committee that they evaluate injuries.
I think if Tate went out and lit it up, it'd be a lot like what Cardale Jones did for Ohio State. I think the committee evaluated based on what they saw. And by the way, what Florida State did at the Swamp was impressive. I called that game. That was a tough environment. I don't care what Florida's record was. That game was impressive for them to be able to get out of that game with a backup quarterback. But when you're looking at what they did the last two games and you're evaluating, they went all the way down to the third guy, a freshman. This is nothing against Mike Norvell. I think we all are proud and so happy to see that Florida State brand back from where it was 3, 4, 5 years ago to where it is now. It has sustainability, and it's going to be around with Mike, and they're going to do a great job. To me, if you took J.J. McCarthy off of Michigan, we'd be saying the same thing right now about Michigan. If you took Michael Penix off of Washington the last two games, and they were struggling with a backup quarterback, we wouldn't be looking at the totality of Washington's season. We'd be looking at the last two games. You have to look at the last couple games without the heart and soul. This guy is the face of this resurgence of Florida State, Jordan Travis, and to take him out is just as big as any player in the country that you would take off that roster. So to me, it's a reflection of what he meant to that team specifically. And these last 2 weeks, giving Tate and giving Brock the backup, the third string guy, an opportunity. And it's just a reality. You're comparing them, Alabama to Florida State. You got to give Alabama the nod, even though they had a close game against Auburn in a rivalry game. They beat Georgia on a neutral site, and Georgia was the team, and Alabama just beat them. You cannot take Alabama out of this. They have to be in, and I think the committee did a great job. I tip my cap as well.
Okay, so that's and Herb Street is being blamed by a lot of the angry Florida State people by saying, oh, you set the table for this, by saying, we can't have another TCU, and I don't think they could have. I mean, do you want to see another game like that? Do you want to see Georgia totally outmatch TCU in a championship game that was over in the first quarter? No, nobody wants to see that. So this is what we have. So both things are true. Florida State is screwed. I mean, it's terrible. Their starting quarterback got hurt, and that's why they're not in. But they're looking for the top 4 teams in the country right now, not a month and a half ago before Travis got hurt. It's now. And now these are the top. Well, you could also argue that Georgia should be in there too. You don't think Georgia's one of the top 4 teams? Well, they're left out. They can't be in because they lost one game to Alabama, one great close game to Alabama, who Booger McFarland said shouldn't be in there, but I don't think anybody would argue they're not one of the top teams in the country, and I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Saban wins another one. I think this would be 7, 8 national championships for him. I think so. Whatever it is, it's remarkable. And he beat Kirby Smart again in an SEC championship game. He's never lost to him in that. He's lost to him during the playoff, but never in that. And with one fell swoop, Alabama's back in, and Georgia is out. And the number 1 team in the country has a coach that the NCAA may suspend next year if he's still coaching, in Jim Harbaugh. I mean, it's crazy. And here's more to the lunacy of college football right now. Transfer portal opens today. You know who's in it? Ohio State quarterback Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord was a really close game away from knocking out the number 1 team in the country, Michigan, and they would be in the playoff because certainly they'd have taken care of Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. And this is a quarterback who waited his time at Ohio State, waited 2 years behind C.J. Stroud to get his opportunity. And he won the starting job this year, had a really good year, 3,100 yards passing, 24 touchdown passes, 6 interceptions, completion percentage of 65.8. Had a great year for a team that had a great season and lost a 6-point game to Michigan in what is probably the biggest regular season game of the year every year in college football. He's leaving. Ohio State is going to be playing in the Cotton Bowl on December 29th, and I guess he's not going to play in that since he's transferring. I mean, it's crazy. And it could be Ryan Day saying to him, yeah, look, you are probably the difference between us not getting into the playoffs, so we're going to be looking for another starting quarterback next year. Or this is Kyle McCord saying to himself, well, this is my value right now. I've just taken Ohio State to within a hair of getting into the playoffs. Somebody's going to want to pay me a lot of money. I'm going to play for somebody else and make more cash. And I guess so he's in his third year, meaning he's only used up 2 years of eligibility. So he'll go someplace else and play for 2 years or play for 1 year and sell his services someplace else. This is the new reality of college football. And everybody can talk about the purity of sport and how important it is to have sportsmanship. And didn't Florida State exhibit the greatest sportsmanship in winning all of their games? And even when their starting quarterback went down and they had to go to a third-string quarterback, they still won the ACC championship game. But also, they're in the television business with the networks. They want to provide the product that's going to keep the most viewers. And the kind of games that we have had, by and large, there have been some really incredible games that have been played, but for the most part, again, the average margin of victory, 19 points, so they want to stay away from another Florida State blowout with a backup quarterback. It's a very difficult question. I could see it from both sides, but as a fan who wants to watch good games, I'm pretty happy with the 4 that they took. I think that maybe I would even make an argument that Georgia should have been in there, and maybe Texas should have been left out. I don't know. But that's just the reality of what the committee had to deal with, and they chose Alabama because whatever you want to say about the SEC and how unfair it is, that is the third division of the NFL. They send more players to the NFL. They got more people watching it, more people caring about it. Florida State, ACC, basketball conference. Used to be, anyway. Yeah, the old Rigo line there. We're going to get to Rigo because Sandra Day O'Connor passed away on Friday at the age of 93. And there were some really terrific obits that were done in the papers, and people spoke fondly about her on television, of course. She was the first female on the Supreme Court, a trailblazer and a real important person in American history. And actually somebody kind of in the same mold of Rigo. She was tough. She grew up on a cattle ranch. And I'll read from some of the obit in the Post over the weekend, what she went through growing up to get to where she got to. And she earned it, that's for sure. And, one of the most famous Riggins incidents took place in 1985. I think he was still playing at the time. It may have been after his last season or just before his last season. But he was at a big banquet with the vice president at the time, George Bush, and he was seated at a table with Sandra Day O'Connor, had too many, and famously unleashed the line, "Loosen up, Sandy baby, you're too tight." And anybody who knows Washington Redskins lore, particularly Rigo lore, knows that story, even though we're coming up, on 40 years, almost 40 years since that happened. But there was a great piece that was done in a Football Life about Riggins about that, and we'll revisit that coming up. Those were the good old days. These are the days that hopefully will be in the rearview mirror before too long. But as Josh Harris said last week at a Sports Business Daily conference, it's going to have to take some time. You have to be patient on this. And yesterday gave you a picture of just how far away they are. Man, I mean, at the beginning of the season, you're talking about a top 10 returning defense, which Ron Rivera said was going to be the strength of the team and was going to have to carry the team while the offense came along. They won their first 2 games of the season. And at one point, not too long ago, they were 4-5 and in the playoff hunt, and Sam Howell was developing, and the feeling was, well, Howell is going to get better and the team is going to get better around him, and now they're a complete disaster. They've given up 90 points in the last 2 weeks. They have been non-competitive in 2 straight games, and before that, they lost a game to the lowly New York Giants, who they've been swept by this year. Swept at home. I mean, they're terrible right now. And I was at the game yesterday. It was a big Dolphin crowd, which I get to, and B, you get a picture when you see the whole field of just how inept this pass defense is, especially when you're facing receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Waddle had 59 yards of catches, I believe, and Hill had 2 touchdown bombs that he caught. One of them he fielded like Willie Mays in center field. The other one, he was just so wide open. It was almost like that Deshaun Watson play on that Monday night game in 2010. I think it was like the second play of the game where Donovan McNabb threw a touchdown pass to him and he was so wide open it was ridiculous. I mean, it was just this is a game where you look at the final score and you go, "Ooh, boy, that must have been a real blowout." It could have been worse. This is a Dolphin team that hung 70 on the Denver Broncos. They could have gotten to 70 if they wanted. Mike White, their backup quarterback, played most of the fourth quarter. I mean, it was a complete steamroll of Washington, and they had absolutely no pass defense for that. And being there, I not only got to look at how the defense was in no position to cover these receivers, but just how many people showed up in Aqua. And I went with my brother-in-law, who's a Dolphin fan, so I added to this. But I looked on the other side of the field, and the stands were full. I give them credit for this. They did sell out the place. This wasn't a Snyder sellout where you'd see like the upper deck completely empty and they'd announce it as a sellout. No, this is a real sellout. But it was people in Aqua. I got a picture tweeted out of that at Andy Poland 1 if you want to check it out. As Tom Lavero, who was there yesterday, writes in his column today, here's a suggestion to new owner Josh Harris. If your sellouts are driven by a majority of opposing teams' fans, it's nothing to brag about. That's a Dan Snyder move. And to Harris's credit, he stayed away from mentioning the name Dan Snyder and has never really talked about, oh, this is the mess we were left with. He's always talking about, moving ahead and having patience and things like that. And what Lavero says, and he's right, he says the real fan appreciation is that Dan Snyder doesn't own the team. Like Tony Robbins once said, change your expectation for appreciation and the world changes instantly. And, I think that is the one thing that you can feel good about for a season that's completely gone down the tubes and sadly has 5 weeks to go. It's going to be 5 weeks from today where we're going to find out that Ron Rivera got fired because they got a bye week coming up, and they still have 4 games to drag along. I said this when they lost to Dallas on Thanksgiving Day, that when your season dies on Thanksgiving, you're left with dragging around this carcass for another 6 weeks, and they have 17 games now. It's going to be 18, and there are going to be teams like this, and Washington has been a team like this far too often. And they are once again. This is Ron Rivera trying to put as much lipstick on this pig as possible.
We got a quarter of the season left to go. We're bringing him in next week, and we'll work through the next few days and just make sure you got to understand we got a quarter of the season left to play and expect everybody to show up and play.
Obviously, facing adversity right now, coaching staff, players. What's the makeup right now? Like, what's everybody feeling?
Well, disappointed. I mean, you lose a game, and unfortunately, we really didn't give ourselves a chance. We made too many mistakes, and we've got to make sure we can limit those.
Yeah, well, you have to limit a lot of mistakes. 78-yard touchdown pass to Hill in the first quarter, and Van Ginkel, defensive end, a 33-yard pick six. The game was basically over at the end of the first quarter. It was 17-0, and at the half, it was 31-7. I mean, you're not coming back from that. And he says, coming out of the locker room to the sideline reporter, yeah, we're going to have to run the ball in the second half. What, are you kidding me? Are you kidding? Yeah, just absolute, they got clobbered. They got. I'll get to the passing game for the Dolphins, which was actually a clinic yesterday. But I mean, the numbers that Miami had: 406 total yards, average gain per play, almost 7 yards. Top of that, 123 yards rushing, 283 passing. I mean, it was there was nothing about this game where you really, at least I felt being there, that they were in it. I never felt, especially after they threw that touchdown pass to Hill in the first 6 minutes of the game, that they had any chance to be in this. They just were not in it in any way. And then you certainly can blame most of it on the defense, but the offense is no bargain now either. Sam Howell ran for 127 yards. That's not really a pat on the back there. That's Sam Howell running for his life. There just wasn't anything there that he could find, so he just took off and ran a bunch of times. And they were unable to really contain the pass rush of Miami once again. 3 more sacks for Howell plus the pick 6. And you've got a highly paid wide receiver. You got a receiver who's supposed to be your Tyreek Hill in Terry McLaurin, and he was not only did he not have a catch, he was only targeted 3 times all afternoon. Now, Howell is a stand-up guy, so he takes the blame for these things. But this is Howell on his biggest weapon, not getting a single touch yesterday.
Definitely not what we wanted to do coming into the game. Not only Terry, but I feel like we struggled to get all of our guys involved in the game today, and we just gotta be better. Terry's the best player in our offense, and we gotta find ways to get him the football. I gotta find ways to get him the football. Obviously he had a few targets, but 3 targets isn't enough for your best player. So we just gotta try to find more ways to get him involved.
Do you talk to him after a game like that?
Yeah, we haven't had a moment yet after this game, but he knows what I think of him as a player, and that I'm trying to do my job and trying to get him the football. So it's definitely just something that's frustrating, and it's never the plan or intent to not get him involved. So it's just something we got to try to get better at.
I've heard him say that before. You got to get the ball in his hands. Some of that I think you have to blame on Eric Bieniemy. Throw him a screen pass. Just get him some touches. The fact that he did not catch a pass and was only targeted 3 times. And this is a little telling after the game because McLaurin is not like this. He's not a sarcastic guy. And he went to sarcasm on this, not angry sarcasm, but kind of yeah, could you believe this? 90 points given up in the last 2 weeks, a game. When's the last time they were in a game? Let me look at this real quick before I get to McLaurin. The last time they won was Week 9 against the Patriots. They had a competitive loss against Seattle, okay? So Week 10, Seattle beat them 29-26 on a field goal at the gun. They have been non-competitive the last 3 weeks. They lost to the Giants at home, 31-19. They lost at Dallas, 45-10. And they lost yesterday, 45-15. McLaurin, at this point, figured they'd be better, and he'd certainly be a much bigger part of the offense. He's having his worst year right now. They're just not getting him the ball. And he went to kind of lighthearted sarcasm after the game about not being targeted.
Nah, I ran a lot of cardio, so it happens. It comes with it when it's tough. But yeah, it's frustrating. But I'm gonna keep coming in and practicing and playing hard. As long as I turn on the film and I'm making extra blocks down the field. When I'm trying to clear it out for guys, I'm gonna continue to run my routes hard. So that's what I'm gonna do. At the end of the day, I'm not gonna quit. But yeah, it's frustrating.
He's not gonna quit. But I don't want to even say the rest of the team quit. They're just not good. They're poorly coached and poorly put together by a coach who had all that responsibility and kept telling us, "Oh, we're growing. We've changed the culture." The culture isn't any better. Culture stinks. You want to hear culture? Here's a guy who's been here through the bad culture and what they call good culture. This is Jonathan Allen, who unleashed a tirade when they lost to the Giants, and that was, Jesus, when was that back? That was that was the first Giants loss when they lost 14-7. So that's Week 7. We're now heading into Week 14. So this is a while back. This is Jonathan Allen, who clearly, you can hear it in his voice. I'm fed up. I've been here 7 years, and this is who I play for.
What needs to change to get this thing back going the right way?
That's a great question. I have no idea.
What happened today?
It's not a very good defense. Can't stop the run. Can't stop the pass.
How does that get fixed?
That's a great question.
Say to the guys as they go in the bye week.
What are you playing for? You're playing for your pride? It's up to every guy. I know what I'm playing for, and that's all I'm going to do. Continue to do.
Is the message of growth and development, does that kind of get old after a while when there aren't wins to go with it?
Again, I've been here for 7 years. There's only so much growth and development you can go through before you start demanding performance. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and that is a fire alarm going off. They had to evacuate the locker room briefly before coming back. 2 weeks ago, it was no hot water in the locker room. Not all the fault of new ownership. They've put some money into the stadium. The scoreboards really look good, but it's Sisyphus. It's a losing battle right now. Let's look at the Dolphins here. And part of the narrative of this past week was, well, we're really going to be mad as a fan base if the defense looks really good. If Ron Rivera taking over the defense and having them play well, and they look really sharp, and we wasted all this time with Jack Del Rio. They should have gotten rid of Jack Del Rio long ago, and this team might have been in the playoff hunt. Ron Rivera, as a defensive play caller, is not good. Not good right now. Maybe he was at one time. He talked about simplifying the defense. They simplified it to the point yesterday where early in the game, in the first quarter, here's Tyreek Hill, maybe the most dangerous receiver in the league, lining up with man coverage with a rookie corner named Quan Martin. And that's when his eyes lit up as big as saucers, and so did his quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. Here's Hill on what happened there.
It was a favorable matchup. Tua noticed immediately that that there was a backer on A-Chain, because if you watch the whole play, they had a backer on A-Chain who ran a really good route on the other side. So he really could have picked, either side, for a touchdown. So he signaled me because that wasn't originally my route, and, we was just on the same page.
A-Chain is the running back. So he's telling you the way they lined up against that defense, the way they came out there for a 78-yard touchdown pass, they're I guess the 22-yard line. Here's Tua coming to the line and going, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Do I throw a touchdown pass to A-Chain or do I throw a touchdown pass to Hill? I can have either one. This defense looks like lunch meat. Hey, what? But let me pick one. Okay, you got to keep your wide receiver happy. Your big wide receiver and Tyreek Hill. Let's give Tyreek Hill the ball. More from Hill. And this is, as he's looking out there, and he's probably saying to himself, really? Really? You're going to match up Quan Martin with me one-on-one with no safety help over the top? Really? You're going to do that?
Those guys are, great at what they do, and they also get paid, man. But at some point, it's like, man, I don't know, man. I just appreciate it, Thanks for, not respecting me, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the lack of respect, Ron. Thanks for putting out a defense that had the quarterback picking which speedy player he would like to throw the ball to for a touchdown. Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much. You want to do that? Okay. Yeah. Now Rivera's talking about missed assignments or whatever. Come on. I mean, the defense you put out there was defenseless yesterday. 406 yards, and they could have had a lot more. 31-7 lead at the half. You're just looking to run clock in the second half. If they wanted to keep throwing, they could have, and they probably would have if they weren't playing on a wet, slippery field, and you don't want Tyreek Hill to pull a hamstring. I think that had a lot to do with it, too. This could have been, with the right circumstances, a game where they could have scored maybe 60 points. And I was thinking 31-7 at the half. Two of the highest scoring games in NFL history took place in Washington. The 1940 championship game where the Bears won 73-0, and in 1966 when the Redskins beat the New York Giants 72-41. And I'm thinking 72 for a regular season game is in play, and 73 for the all-time record is there if they want it. That's how bad the defense was yesterday. It was absolutely abysmal. I did get home in time to see this. I was really excited about seeing the Eagles and the 49ers play, and by the time I got home, it was only a 6-0 game, but it turned out to be a blowout, 42-19 San Francisco. And during the game, this is going to be one of the sidelight stories that people are going to talk about throughout the week. The Eagles have a security officer and senior advisor to the general manager. His name is Dom DeSando, a perfect name for a perfect person for this job, a tank of a human being, a beloved tracksuit-wearing institution in Philadelphia. So there was a play on the sidelines where Drew Greenlaw came over, and there was a little back and forth between the two of them. Not a big fight, just kind of a little shove, but they wound up ejecting both of them. And as Connor Orr writes at SI.com today, DeSando's primary responsibility, protecting players and coaches he loves dearly, overrode the common sense rule that anyone on an NFL sideline cannot make physical contact with a player on the field. Anyone with a best friend, child, pet, or encroached upon bottle of beer have felt the same paternal bear instinct. And I didn't remember this, but Orr points this out. He said he covered the Jets when their strength and conditioning coach reached out his foot towards the field during a punt return and tripped the player. Remember this name, Sal Alosi? Yeah, I remember that. So you can't have that. And he looks at Article 8 of the NFL Rulebook, Section 1. Non-player personnel of a club are prohibited from making unnecessary physical contact with or directing abusive, threatening, or insulting language or gestures at opponents, game officials, or representatives of the league. So I imagine there's going to be a hefty fine for Greenlaw, the player, and Dom DeSando, the now legendary Dom DeSando, is probably going to be suspended for the rest of the season. They'll just have to get another security guy on the sideline for the Eagles, or maybe he'll even get fired. Who knows? But, I mean, once you get sideline personnel fighting with players, you're really asking for it. That and especially in Philadelphia, where you can get a shower of beer cans raining down on you, you don't want that to happen. That's the perfect storm. Angry fan base, foggy, cold, miserable weather. Your team is getting beat by San Francisco. Ooh, that could have been really bad. One last thing from the locker room yesterday. This is Sam Howell, and poor old Sam Howell's got a week off, and then he's got to play 4 more as his growth and development continues. Here's what he's looking at as his second season in the NFL can't wrap up soon enough.
I think we know that we're a way better team than what we've shown, especially the last few weeks. We know that with the guys we have on this team, we know we're definitely capable of winning more games than we've won. And so for us, we want to show who we can really be these last 4 games. And we're going to take it one game at a time and try to give it all we got.
You are what your record says you are, and this is a 4-9 team. It's a 4-9 team. They will not set the record for most losses in a season. It's 13. Done that a couple of times. Once under Mike Shanahan. Did it under Norv. They may have done it another time too. So they're going to lose a maximum of 13 games. But boy, it's really bad. It's bad right now. Tony Kornheiser is coming up next. I'll be back here tomorrow. We'll do a lot more college football tomorrow. Lauren Druhan will join us at 10 o'clock. She's an Auburn fan. Auburn playing Maryland in the Music City Bowl, but more important, the Final Four. We'll do all that tomorrow. I will see you then at 9 a.m.